That hunter glared at Song with an expression that contained all of his dissatisfaction before he spun his head around and angrily grabbed the door handle. It happened then. Song's eyes grew extra large. No! Splash! The area above the hunter's neck suddenly vanished. The headless body powerlessly collapsed to the ground. Hunters began screaming their heads off. The stone statue that smashed a human's head apart with a steel mace returned to its original spot next to the door, as if nothing important had happened, its body completely covered in fresh blood. That thing can move? What the hell? Does that mean every statue in here can move too? We gotta fight against these things? I couldn't even see that dumb thing swing the mace, so how can I? Unlike others here, though, Jinwoo knew the truth. Their troubles only had just begun. Didn't Ju Hui say it earlier? The eyes of the god statue moved towards us. Just now. If what she said is true? A chill rapidly ran down his spine. Jinwoo forced his stiff neck to turn around so he could look behind him. The stone statue of the god was looking down at him. It was then the god statue's two black eyes changed to red. Was this the instincts of a hunter? No, the instincts of a living being were sending out urgent warning signals. Something was coming, something none of them could contend with. Jinwoo turned towards the other hunters and cried out as loudly as he could. Get down! Almost at the same time, red beams of light shot out from the eyes of the god statue. Jinwoo hugged Ju Hui and threw their bodies to the floor. The beam shot right by the spot Jinwoo had been standing. 1/10 of a second. No, he survived by 1/100th of a second. That was definitely too close for comfort. Unfortunately, not everyone was as lucky as Jinwoo. Those who were swallowed up by the red light evaporated where they stood. Only the ashes of what used to be human hunters remained where the beam flew past. The screams came not from the dead hunters, but those who witnessed their final moments from the sidelines, actually. What the click was that? How can such a thing even be? The remaining hunters began freaking out. Out of the 17 hunters, only 11 survived. Not one of them had ever experienced such a powerful attack before in their lives. I barely made it because he told me to get down. If it wasn't for Mr. Seong's shouts, hunters stared at Jinwoo while nervously swallowing their saliva. Jinwoo turned out to be their unlikely savior. Without his timely warning, they could only imagine what would have happened to them, and that thought sent chills down their spines. While still lying prostrate on the ground, Jinwoo glared at the god statue. Its eyes were still glowing in red, but it did not attack again. Is the attack over? Jinwoo looked underneath him. The scared, silly Yi Ju Hui was trembling in his arms. This was the reason why she worked for the association and not for a big guild, and participated in simple raids like this one, even though she was nominally an excellent hunter with a rank as high as B. Ju Hui's breathing was getting rougher by the second. He couldn't let her be like this. He had to do something. Jinwoo was about to raise his body up, thinking that he gotta do something here, but then someone grabbed his shoulders and pushed him back down, hard. Don't get up. It was Mr. Song, somehow next to the youth before anyone had noticed it. Jinwoo was flustered, but still did as he was told. Song then shouted at the other hunters. Nobody move! Stay exactly where you are. Song looked around before focusing on Jinwoo. Only those that moved got killed. Those who listened to you and got down survived. It seems that way. Song tilted his head slightly. I thought you warned us because you figured something out. No, well, I just felt something dangerous was coming, so... A flash of light brushed past Song's eyes just then. His instincts are pretty good, in other words. He's a rank E hunter, if only his abilities were a bit higher. Just as Song stared at Jinwoo with a rueful expression, Jinwoo too found a little bit of leeway to check out the older hunter's condition. And the youth's eyes opened up wider after finding something pretty terrible. Juicy, your arm? This is nothing. I can still hold on. But still, Jinwoo swallowed down his saliva. Song's other hand that wasn't pressing down on Jinwoo's shoulder, his left arm, was gone. Song studied Juhoi's conditions for a bit before he took off the t-shirt he was wearing, and while not even showing the enormous amount of pain he must be feeling, he wrapped up what was left of his left arm. Help me tie up the end, please. It's difficult to sew with only one hand. Jinwoo could only nod his head then. They were able to somehow stop the bleeding for now. Rather than a scream or a pained moan, Song let out a long sigh. It was a sigh containing 10 years' worth of experience as a hunter. Now that the first aid was over, Song's gaze became a level sharper as he studied his surroundings. Although the god statue stopped attacking them, their situation hadn't improved in the slightest. And like so, seconds continued to tick by. Just why do we have to suffer like this? A few hunters even began shedding tears now. We can't stay like this forever. The patience of the other hunters was running out as well. Jinwoo agreed with that sentiment, though. Right, we can't stay here forever. But what could he possibly do here? If Song's suspicion was correct, then the moment they moved, they'd get attacked. And even if they got lucky and managed to evade the beams and reach the door, there were the two stone statues guarding the doorway to worry about as well. They were a big problem too, actually. The movements of the doorkeepers were so fast that he couldn't see it with his eyes. Could he or anyone else open the door and escape before those statues attacked them? It sounded completely impossible, which meant that the annihilation of the hunters was just a matter of time. Wait, a matter of time? When his thoughts arrived there, a strong sense of disharmony filled him up. An event that couldn't have happened, but it happened anyway. But no one else seemed to have picked up on it yet. We missed something here. Without a doubt, the answer to their salvation hid in that something. It was then. Don't move, Song shouted at Mr. Ju, who was at the far end of the group. Shut up! Who knows when that thing will start attacking us again? But you want me to stay here and wait? Mr. Ju was a close combat type hunter. These types of hunters possessed far, far superior physical abilities than regular human beings. On top of this, Ju was about to sign up with a big guild after his skills were acknowledged by them not too long ago as well. I'll not die here today. While keeping low to the ground, Ju put all his strength down to his legs. His aim was at the doorway. The muscles on his legs were swelling up fast. Song could only mutter out to himself. Right then, Ju kicked the ground and exploded forward. Meanwhile, Jinwoo hurriedly turned his head to look at the god statue. Just as he suspected, the eyes of the statue were fixed on the back of Mr. Ju. And then, the chilling red ray shot out from those eyes. The beam slammed on the back of Mr. Ju. The female hunter screamed at the top of her lungs. She must have developed a leak, because a puddle of yellow liquid formed where she was squatting on the ground. The expressions of the hunters froze hard. Oh my God. Mr. Ju no longer stood where the red beam flew past. Only the pair of ownerless ankles could be seen now. One of the men with a weaker constitution began emptying the contents of his stomach. Jinwoo's expression also crumpled as well. As expected, the god statue could easily finish them off if it felt like it. It'd be easier than stepping on squirming bugs, actually. If that's the case, then why hadn't it? It could kill them, yet it hadn't done that. This was a completely different pattern of behavior compared to the monsters that attacked as soon as spotting human hunters in their vicinity. These statues only moved if certain conditions were met. The doorkeepers that only attacked if someone approached the door. The eyes of the god statue firing that red beam if someone moved. It was like a game with a set regulation. Hang on. Could there be some kind of rules in this chamber? It was here that a piece of puzzle found its place in Jinwoo's head. He began recalling the contents of the stone slate Song was reading not too long ago. That was why. The laws of the Karudanan Temple, was it? Regulation was rules, and rules could be laws as well. The key to their safe escape from this camber had to be buried within those warnings found on the stone slate. Worship the god. That was the first law. Did you just say something? Song shifted his gaze back to Jinwoo. Instead of a reply, Jinwoo simply placed his index finger on his lips. It was a sign asking for a bit of time to think. If my thoughts are right... Jinwoo slowly rose up. Song hurriedly tried to stop the youth, but Jinwoo shook his head while carrying a determined expression. Doesn't look like he gave up on living. Song nodded his head. Jinwoo kept his eyes trained squarely at the god statue and carefully stood up. Almost right away, the eyes of the statue were fixed on Jinwoo, and, as expected, the red beam was fired in his direction. If he got down to the ground a moment slower, it'd be his face melting away, instead of a few strands of hair on top of his head. Lying face down on the ground, Jinwoo breathed in and out quite heavily. He nearly died just then. The moment the statue's eyes met his, he thought he was going to die for sure. He somehow did dodge it, but his legs wouldn't stop shaking from the fear. Still, he learned something important just now. It's not attacking someone who's moving around. As long as he was squatting low to the ground, he could go anywhere he wanted to, and the statue's eyes would remain still. However, if one stood up, then the red beam would be fired without hesitation. The DM thing only attacks if we breach a certain height. That was why Jinwoo bet his life on proving this theory right just now. And now he was sure of it. The meaning behind the first law that was. Jinwoo shouted out towards the rest of the hunters. Everyone! Their attention shifted towards him in an instant. Jinwoo spoke as he met their gazes. You must kowtow towards the god statue. Hunters began tilting their heads after hearing him. You want us to kowtow to that statue? Hunters exchanged glances with each other before loudly cussing out at Jinwoo. Dang you! What are you spewing here? What the hell? How can you say something like that under the current circumstances? Have you lost your mind, Seong Jinwoo? Kim's face became boiling red as he began snorting like a bull. I had no idea you, Mr. Seong, would be like this. If I could move, then I'd have punched you in the face already. Jinwoo bit on his lower lip. 6 of their comrades were killed by the god statue. So it was rather obvious that the surviving hunters would cuss him out when he told them to kowtow towards that abominable thing. It wasn't hard to understand what these hunters were feeling at the moment. And the most important thing was he had no logical evidence to back his theory up. He only had his gut feelings. Indeed, that was the only way to describe it. However, I'll do as you say. That voice came from Jinwoo's back. Everyone's eyes immediately shifted there. It was Mr. Song, effectively the leader of this group. Mr. Song Ahjusi? You are going to kowtow to that dang statue? Just as other hunters began to freak out, Song looked straight at Jinwoo. Young man, you've discovered something, haven't you? Jinwoo resolutely nodded his head. Is it your instinct again? Yes, for the time being, I see. Just now, 11 people survived thanks to Jinwoo's instincts. Well, with the death of Mr. Ju, there were 10 now, but still. If it was Jinwoo's instincts, then wouldn't it be worth believing it at least once more? That's what Song thought. When Song knelt down and kowtowed towards the god statue, the mood had become solemn and silent. He's really doing it. Seizing upon this opportunity, Jinwoo shouted out once more. Everyone, I beg of you, please kneel before the god statue. We might be able to get out of here alive. Might live. Might be able to get out alive. The impact those simple words carried was quite explosive. We might live. We can get out of here. With just one kowtow? The hesitant hunters began to plop down to the ground, as if they were really kowtowing. The number of them performing the act gradually increased. In the end, even the complaining Kim bowed his head towards the statue. However, there was no visible change to the god statue. Indeed, those chilling red lights still shone from the eyes of the statue. Jinwoo felt his heart go cold. Was I wrong? It was here that his gaze shifted to Ju Hui next to him. No matter how generous one was, it was difficult to describe her posture of squatting on the ground, shivering while holding her head in her hands as her kowtowing. What if... Jinwoo carefully grasped Ju Hui's wrist. She raised her head like a scared cat. Seeing her, Jinwoo wordlessly nodded his head. Only then did she relax her muscles somewhat. With that, Jinwoo was able to slowly change her posture. Done. There was only one person remaining now, and that would be him. Jinwoo knelt down towards the god statue, placed his hands on the ground, and slowly lowered his head. Finally, something began to change. Huh? Hunters who had noticed the change first raised their voices. The god statue? Look at the statue. Its eyes. The red light buzzing in its eyes was gradually weakening. What the hell? Is this really going to work? Eventually, the red light completely vanished. Hunters began rejoicing loudly. The red light is gone. We made it. The excited hunters began standing up one at a time. Even then, the statue didn't fire the red beam. Jinwoo belatedly raised his head and spat out a sigh of relief. Whew! Just as he suspected, this chamber operated strictly within the set regulations. If that's the case, then this game was far from over. 2 more laws still remained. The second law, exalt the god, and the third law, prove one's piety. It was then, accompanied by a goosebump-inducing noise, the entire chamber began to shake. Jinwoo's expression hardened immediately. As I thought... His suspicions proved to be correct once more. Things were only getting started. The humongous god statue was slowly rising up from the stone throne. Hunters were hugging each other while shedding tears of joy until then. But when they realized this turn of events, they all froze up like statues themselves. What the hell? It wasn't over yet? This can't be. None of them could articulate what they wanted to say. Despair rapidly dyed their expressions. Soon, the god statue completely stood up from the throne. The creature swept its gaze around once and began walking towards the hunters. Every time the god statue stepped on the ground, the whole world seemed to shake. It was so tall that its head was almost scraping against the chamber's indescribably high ceiling. Even when the hunters were overwhelmed by the statue's sheer size, the thing was gradually closing its distance to them. Mr. Seong! Mr. Seong Jinwoo! What can we do? The hunters who were cussing at Jinwoo only a short while ago hurriedly began crowding around him. Is there a way out of this? Say something! All these adults were forming tearful expressions, as if they'd start breaking down in sobs and wails very soon. Currently, Jinwoo was their only hope. Jinwoo helped the frozen stiff Ju Hui up from the ground and began talking about the second law. Exalt the god. That's the key. Wait, isn't that... Kim suddenly butted in as if he knew something others didn't. Isn't that what's written on the slate? Correct. Worship the god, exalt the god, and finally, prove your piety. We need to satisfy all 3 laws. Jinwoo began speaking faster and faster. Why? The god statue was already a stone's throw away from them. Everyone's complexion paled as the gigantic shadow loomed over them. Let me try something. A young male hunter who usually kept to himself suddenly took a step forward. What are you trying to do? I've been in a church choir. I'm confident if it's about exalting something. The young hunter slowly stepped forward towards the statue while disregarding the dissuasion of Kim. He regulated his breathing while looking up at the god statue before he took a large gulp of air. I come to you, Lord. His clear voice began reverberating within the chamber. Renew my faith once more. Bless me with your grace, Lord. The statue stopped its march in front of the singing hunter. Hunters began gasping out in elation. The god statue didn't move from the spot as if it was absorbed by the singing. All the other noises in the room vanished. Only the young man's voice could be heard in the chamber's interior. The young hunter was encouraged by this and carried on. All the weakness found in me. Through your love, I shall overcome. Among the hunters, only Jinwoo was shuddering from this ominous sensation filling him up. This is wrong. Jinwoo swallowed up his words several times. The chamber featured its own set of rules, but the young hunter was exalting the god statue with the rule of Christianity, not with the rules of this chamber. Thankfully, the statue wasn't moving, but could singing that hymn qualify as upholding the rules? Jinwoo shook his head. The only reason why he didn't say anything was solely because he couldn't think of a better way to stop the god statue himself. It was right then. The weighty noise reverberated throughout the chamber. The female hunter screamed at the top of her lungs. When the stone statue lifted its leg up, bloody mess of what used to be the young hunter could be found on the ground, as well as on the bottom of its foot. Other hunters began screaming in panic and shock, too. The face of the statue, emotionless until then, was now crumpled in pure rage. It's angry! Run! Run away! Hunters dispersed away from the statue in a hurry. Unfortunately for the female hunter, she lost her reasoning and stood on the spot while screaming loudly after personally witnessing the death of the young male hunter. Inwoo was running away while carrying Juhui in his arms, but he turned around so he could go and help that woman out. But then Song stopped the youth. But, Yusi? It's too late. As if slapping a fly down, the god statue slammed its palm down at the female hunter. Jinwoo inadvertently shifted his gaze away. It was a truly gruesome sight, and he couldn't bear to watch it unfold. There is no time to waste like this. Are you planning to let this girl die too? Song's words sobered Jinwoo up in an instant. It was as he said. The statue was not walking around anymore. No, it was actually running around and stepping on the humans it found nearby. Whenever the thing stepped on the ground, the entire chamber shook around, hard. Jinwoo gritted his teeth and began running again. Juhui squeezed her eyes shut and held onto him for her dear life. Let's split up. Yes. Thinking that moving around together was dangerous, Jinwoo and Song ran in separate directions. Jinwoo made sure to run towards the furthest corner from the frenzied god statue. However, there was another hunter who had arrived there before he did. It was Mr. Park. Park was running with everything he had. Tears formed on the edges of his eyes when he recalled his family. Back home, a son who resembled him so much, and a wife pregnant with their second child was waiting for him. He couldn't die here, not like this. Perhaps because he ran with everything he had, he was able to run the furthest away from the statue out of everyone here. As Park tried to control his heavy breathing in the corner, his friend Kim urgently shouted at him. "Mr. Park!" Park raised his head after hearing the familiar voice. "Yeah?" Kim pointed at the spot behind Park and cried out, "You're back! Look behind you!" It was then something sharp gleamed coldly behind Mr. Park. Park was sliced in half from the top of his head right down to his groin. His cleanly cut two halves fell to the ground. The stone statue that killed Park with its greatsword returned to its position as if nothing had happened, exactly like how the doorkeeper did before. Kim began tearing up after witnessing this scene. Behind him, the humongous god statue was stepping on and killing humans one at a time, and if you ran towards the corner in order to avoid it, then the stone statues located there would start attacking you. My arm! The interior of the chamber swiftly fell into chaos. Cold sweat dripped down from Jinwoo's forehead. His legs were getting heavier. His breathing was getting rougher and rougher. However, his head was filled with only one chain of thought. Exalt the god, Exalt the god. Exalt the god. The words of the second law circulated in his brain nonstop. The key to unraveling this mystery definitely existed within this chamber. Something within this chamber that they could use. However, when the hunters first entered this place, they had searched every nook and cranny but didn't find a single contraption, nor things that might be some kind of tools. No, back then or now, the only things here that can move are the stone statues. It was then. A thought raced past Jinwoo's brain just then. Only things moving in here are the statues. Jinwoo's eyes widened. Why haven't I thought of that before? If the only things that could move were the stone statues, then the only thing he could use had to be them too. These statues activated when humans got near them, meaning he had to take advantage of this rule. What if? Even though he was running short of breath, Jinwoo roared out loud enough to shake the entire chamber. Run towards the statues holding musical instruments. All the hunters still alive heard Jinwoo's voice. Instruments? A ray of hope found its way into the eyes of the hunters. Quite different to back when he told them to kowtow, everyone moved unbelievably quickly. If Jinwoo was wrong about this, then as soon as arriving near one, they would be killed by the stone statues holding the musical instruments. However, no one here questioned Jinwoo's words. Song was the first one to arrive in front of a statue carrying a musical instrument. Song controlled his heavy breathing and raised his head to look at the statue, and as if it was a lie, the fingers of the statue moved and strummed on the harp. A beautiful melody flowed out. It's working! Hurry to the statues with instruments. Hunters ran towards the nearest correct statues in hurried footsteps. The statue with a trumpet began blowing it triumphantly. One with a flute began playing with it. The one holding the lyre strummed on its strings. While sensing the approach of his physical limit, Kim somehow arrived in front of the statue that held a bazooka and plopped down to the ground. As soon as the statue began playing the instrument, the god statue stopped chasing after Kim. He must have been overcome with emotions, because Kim then began shedding tears while he stayed down on his knees. Meanwhile, the god statue turned around. The creature searched around and soon enough found its next prey. Jinwoo spat out a cuss as his gaze met the god statues. He then began running hard, so hard that his heart might explode. His back was already soaked through in sweat. Why? Why isn't it working? Jinwoo's resentful glare landed on the stone statue in front of him. The statue holding a drum showed no signs of moving at all. The god statue closed in with frightening speed. He was practically on the other side of the chamber from the Deem thing, yet the distance between the two shortened in no time at all. Jinwoo swallowed down his saliva. Could it be that the statue won't play because there are two people here? Me and Miss Juhoi? He couldn't think of anything else. Why? Because other statues were playing music just fine as soon as a hunter stood in front of it. There is no time to think anymore. Jinwoo put Juhoi down and got ready to run to somewhere else. Mr. Jinwoo. Still terrified out of her mind, Juhoi clung onto Jinwoo's sleeve. Jinwoo calmly whispered in her ear, "We'll both die if we stay together." Tears began forming on Juhoi's eyes. Her fingers trembled as they held onto his clothes. Unfortunately, there was no time to explain to her in detail. Jinwoo carefully pried her hand away and began running in the opposite direction as hard as he could. When he glanced back, the statue behind Juhoi began beating its drum in a slow but steady rhythm. What a relief! There was only one thing remaining now: to run to the other statue without getting killed. Only Jinwoo hadn't received the protection of the music-playing statues. Quite obviously, the rage of the god statue was solely directed to Jinwoo and him alone. Jinwoo did his best to avoid the foot of the thing that rivaled a building in size and crossed the room in a hurry. He fell and rolled around, but still, he somehow managed to avoid getting flattened by the god statue's foot. He might only have been a rank E, but he was still a close combat type hunter, so his physique came in handy in situations like this. Just a little bit further, a bit more. Jinwoo kept an eye out on the god statue's movements and ran even harder. His speed increased, and when the distance remaining between him and the stone statue was mere a dozen feet— "No, that's the wrong one!" Mr. Song cried out to him. Jinwoo had been paying attention to the god statue only. He was stunned by the shout and hurriedly turned his head to take a look at his front. It's not a statue with an instrument? He belatedly realized that the thing that looked like a musical instrument from afar was actually a shield instead. And sure enough, the statue mercilessly stabbed down with its shield. Jinwoo hurriedly threw himself to the side. Juhoi screamed. Jinwoo rolled on the ground, and when he came to a stop, he raised his head to see the god statue standing right in front of his nose. It's one thing after another. His forehead must have been torn from him rolling on the ground because blood was flowing down and blurred his vision. His view was restricted, and he couldn't look too far away. Jinwoo quickly searched around his vicinity. An instrument. An instrument. However, no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't see a single statue holding an instrument nearby. Meanwhile, the god statue raised its leg over Jinwoo's position. Jinwoo threw himself again and somehow avoided the foot of the statue again. But he had reached his limit. A powerful dizziness was assaulting him, and for some reason he couldn't even balance himself. Please. If there was a real god, he thought that he'd start praying right about now. It was then Jinwoo spotted a stone statue that held neither a weapon or a musical instrument. Is that... Jinwoo decided to bet everything on that statue. He crawled on the ground and arrived in front of the statue in question. He then managed to flip his body around and lied down on the ground so he could see the god statue. He no longer had any energy to move. Jinwoo stared at the approaching god statue and continued to roughly breathe in and out. The expression of the god statue was far more contorted compared to before, as if it got infuriated further by Jinwoo's continued evasion. The god statue now stopped in front of Jinwoo. Seeing a creature as big as a high-rise blocking his entire view, Jinwoo felt like he couldn't breathe anymore. Did it think he was nothing more than a cornered rat? The god statue simply looked down at him and didn't do anything else. This is the end! Jinwoo sensed his own unavoidable death approaching closer after looking straight into the eyes of the god statue. However, from somewhere behind him, a beautiful and otherworldly voice came out. Jinwoo turned his head around to see what was going on. The lips of the stone statue holding a book moved, and whenever they did, a divine song flowed out and filled the interior of the massive chamber. The crumpled expression of the god statue slowly reverted back to the emotionless state. Soon, all those horrifyingly contorted facial muscles of the statue smoothed out. When the song of the stone statues came to its eventual end, the god statue turned around. Then, just how other stone statues had done until now, it returned to its throne and settled down as if things that happened until now were nothing but a lie. The noise of the god statue sitting down on the throne resounded throughout the chamber. Barely made it a thin smile formed on Jinwoo's lips. Meanwhile, Juhoi began running from her position at the far end of the chamber. "Mr. Jinwoo!" She ran with all her might and knelt down next to him as tears streamed down on her face. "What can I do? What am I supposed to—" She summoned all of her magical energy and activated her healing magic. However, nothing seemed to improve. The dispersed hunters gathered around Jinwoo one by one. Every single one of them carried a dark expression. What? Mr. Jinwoo? Even then, only Juhoi was crying in sorrow. Why was everyone acting like this? Jinwoo's lips bobbled up and down. He wanted to ask what was going on, but he couldn't really summon forth his own voice. Sensing that he had no choice, he tried to prop himself up. Then he noticed the pool of blood around his lower torso. Only then did he belatedly realize the change to his body. To be continued. If the video is deleted, it will remain in the BOOSTY Mojo English dub, or if you want to support my endeavors, please subscribe to my BOOSTY in the description. Mojo English Dub.